Good frosty freezing morning, everybody. It is minus 30 degrees Celsius this morning, and astute viewers will notice that the PHEV is not in the garage this morning. So the other day when we were at the Fur Harvester convention and the car was parked outside all day, the battery was extremely cold and we couldn't charge the battery when I started up. There was no plug-ins there, and that got me thinking we need to do some cold weather, no plug-in testing. And that's what I've been doing the last couple of days. So today is the third day, and we're going to film it live, and I'll discuss everything that I found about running the PHEV outside in extreme conditions when you can't plug it in. Super cold one this morning, guys. Minus 33 degrees Celsius without wind today. I've got to take the car out to the Fur Harvester building. There's a convention this weekend, and it's going to sit in the parking lot all day while I'm at the convention. We'll see what sitting in a parking lot all day does to the PHEV at minus 33. So I started the car. It's actually minus 30-something degrees Celsius out here today. And I pushed the charge button, as I usually do when I'm trying to warm up the car and it has to run anyway. And that is the first time I have ever seen that. Battery too cold. So it was actually minus 33 degrees Celsius this morning at my house, and an hour north of here it was minus 42 degrees Celsius. So the PHEV didn't like that. I mean, it started no problem. It just, apparently the battery's too cold to allow charge to go back into it. So never seen that before. So after the car did go through its warm-up cycle, I was able to put it in EV mode, and it went no problem. So last night was the super blood moon, the eclipse. You can see the moon there on the GoPro. It's hard to see it, but there it is. Very frosty out. You can see by my window here this morning. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is try to start the car in force electric mode. And it doesn't work. The engine is kicked on. We cannot, at minus 30 with the car not plugged in, start it in electric mode. So as I've just shown, the car does not need to be plugged in even at minus 35 to start. We have a 12 kilowatt hour drive battery attached to a starter battery. Starting this car is no problem. However, you won't be able to force electric mode only. The engine, in my testing 3 days now, the engine kicks on right away at those extreme temperatures. Now here I've warmed up the car and I've put it back into electric mode, and you can do that no problem. However, that's not the end of the story. The batteries are still extremely cold. Now that the car is running, the PT heater for the battery is running and starting to warm up the battery, but in my 2 days of testing so far, I can only make it 3-4 minutes down the road, get to the next set of lights, and then the engine kicks on again. So as you can see here, the car is in EV mode, and it is showing minus 27 on the dash here. In the house, it was reading minus 30. I almost forgot to connect the dog and check the battery temperatures here. So now we have done an initial 5-minute warm-up with the engine, and we're showing minus 8 for module minimum temperature. Yeah, it's actually warming up. It just went to minus 7 right there in front of our eyes. And maximum module temperature of 3 degrees Celsius. Also good to note here that the car was unplugged all night. I charged it at 7 o'clock last night, put it outside about 10 o'clock, and look what's showing here, only a 20-kilometer range, and we're showing that one of the battery modules is down already. So 19 kilometers. Everything's changing right in front of us, but there you go. So leaving it unplugged like that all the time, we are losing energy, and then the cold is costing us even more energy. Now, will that number come up as the batteries warm up here and we get driving? Maybe, maybe not. We're driving, we're gonna use full heat today. I'm not messing around with that, so let's just go and see what we get. Okay, I didn't even make it out of my driveway. I made it right to the end of my driveway, and the engine kicked on again from EV mode. So this is what I'm talking about. The batteries are just too cold to run in EV mode right now. And this is what I've seen over the previous 2 tests as well. It's very hard to track kilometers this way because the engine is running. So you can't get a real guesstimate of how many kilowatt hours you used because we're using energy that we're creating right now on the go. So that brings me to another point. When I show you guys the numbers that I'm tracking, you're going to see the last couple of trips where it shows we only used 4 kilowatt hours worth of battery, but 50% of our trip was covered. And that's because the engine is running. We're still using kilowatt hours, even though they're not coming out of the battery, they're being generated by the motor. And the car does track that on your eco information screen. So it's very hard, once you go past using your initial electric energy, your first 30 kilometers when the car is warmed up and you can access those under normal conditions, when you look at your eco energy information screen, if you were to drive 2 hours to the next town, it's going to record your kilowatt hour usage, including all of the energy created by the engine along the way there. So it's very hard to track. Very hard to track when you're just trying to follow how much did you get in a battery from a fully charged state, is where I'm going with that, which is what we're always trying to do. And if I go on longer trips, you can't accurately track that because the PHEV software incorporates all of the motor generated energy as well. Which is why on the channel you guys will see me do all of these tests from a fully charged battery, run it to depletion, and that's the end of our test, because we can accurately track then how many kilowatt hours we used, 100% travel on electric, the engine didn't run, and that's the only way we can test. Anything further than that, and you're adding in generated energy that we just can't track. There we go. I always find that once you drive the car a little bit down the road, it actually shows the true temperature. Minus 31 degrees Celsius right there reading now. So you will notice we are still in EV mode, but the engine has pretty much been running 2.5 kilometers since we left the house. And this is what happens. We can access a little bit of that battery power as we go along, but a lot of engine running. Okay, so I just pulled over here 5 kilometers into the trip to show you guys the battery state. I just checked it again, and we've actually dropped in battery temperature. So we have a minimum temperature of -7 and a maximum temperature of -3. And the car actually went back into electric mode when we pulled over there, and we'll see how long it stays in electric mode. I'm gonna keep recording here for a minute because the last couple times here, it's only been a minute or so and then the engine kicks on again. So you guys unfortunately will just have to chat with me for a minute. I guess we should note that even though we're trying to torture the car by keeping it in EV mode, it is smart enough to make its own decision saying, no, we need to start the engine for whatever reason. So for those of you that are worried about your wives or yourself not understanding how the car works, like my wife doesn't want to know anything about this car. I think she's a little bit afraid to drive it, and I just keep telling her, don't worry about it, don't even push any buttons, don't worry about putting it in electric mode, just let it do its thing. And the car is smart enough that it makes pretty good choices and tries to use up the electric whenever it can, even if you don't put it in EV mode. So I don't worry about her having to read the manual or anything like that. I just tell her, get in and drive it. So it's a very smart car, very easy to drive. You can maximize your distance and your range, obviously, like I do and like a lot of you guys are doing, but if somebody who doesn't want to familiarize themselves with the system wants to get in and drive it, they won't have any issues. Just get in and drive it like a normal car. Okay, so we've come another 3.8 kilometers and the batteries have warmed up a little bit. -5 and -1. And surprisingly, we've made it 4 kilometers now, and the engine hasn't kicked on yet. We're still on electric only. Regenerative braking still works. You can feel the car slowing down as I change B levels, and it shows energy going back into the battery, so no problems there. Okay, so just over the 13 kilometer mark, and the engine has kicked on again. That was better than I thought I was gonna get. And there, it's off again already. So In these extreme cold temperatures, it just seems to kick on for a minute here and there, probably keeping the oil warmed up for the engine. So now we're back in EV mode. It's probably going to stay there for quite a while. Let's just summarize my findings, and that is the car starts no problem, even at minus 35. It won't stay in EV mode when it's first started. The batteries are just too cold. The engine needs to run quite a bit. Once it does that, today we went 5 kilometers, then we were able to go into EV mode, and we stayed there for another 8 kilometers. The engine kicked on for about a minute, and then it shut off, and we're back in EV mode. And this is what I've noticed before. You're just gonna get a few more engine starts in there, and you're probably not gonna get the range that you're gonna get having been plugged in, because the batteries are already pre-warmed. So we're probably gonna lose another 4 or 5 kilometers on our overall trip. Right now the Eco Energy screen is showing 74% trip and 38.1 kilowatt hours. I'm going to run the car here until the battery is depleted. We've got another 9 kilometers to go. Then we'll go home and I'll show you guys the numbers over the last 3 days of testing with no plug-in for extreme cold. So I also want to say, we don't know what the long-term effects of that would be on your vehicle. It's very hard on your vehicle, I would assume, to be starting it in these cold temperatures. Even though we have a drive battery, why would you want to do that? Plug your car in, guys. That's what I'm going to say. Like a normal conventional engine, it's just going to be way easier when your oil is warmed up. You're just everything. Your starter, just plug it in. There's no reason why you would want to, other than a couple of days of testing, to do that. I feel bad even doing it a couple days just for testing. We are out of electric. 21.7 kilometers. Now we have to remember the engine was running for the first 5 kilometers there, so we definitely lost quite a bit of range by not plugging in. And if we go to our vehicle information numbers, 78% of the trip was covered in electric, which is better than I've seen in the previous 2 tests. And our average consumption was 36.8. Almost forgot, final battery numbers. Minimum temperature 0 degrees, maximum temperature 5 degrees. So the battery warming unit is there, it is working. Oh, poor baby. We are definitely gonna plug you in. It's been a long, cold 3 days. Here we are on my electric consumption sheet, and I want to show you guys the last 3 trips here at the bottom. This was the day I left the Fur Harvester building, January the 19th. We had an 11 kilometer trip home, and we used 4 kilowatt hours worth of battery. The important thing here to note is our kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers is very high, 35, but only 50% of my trip was done using electric. Because it was a very short trip, the car didn't have time to warm up, the batteries didn't warm up, the engine ran for half of my trip home. And yesterday's trip, which we didn't videotape, was the same thing, 22 kilometers, but we actually got, once you get past that initial 5 or 7 kilometers, the batteries are warming up, it will go in electric mode and it will stay in electric mode. We got 74% of our trip, and again, very high kilowatt hours. And today's trip, this is the one we recorded, you guys just went with on me, 21.8 kilometers. We used all of the battery power we had, 36.8 kilowatt hours from the dash reading, and 78% of our trip was covered in electric. Now, what I want to do very quickly is compare these numbers to up here. We have the same, almost the same trips in warmer conditions, and the car was plugged in. This is why I keep track of all of this stuff. So if we're plugging the car in, let's take this one right here on January the 8th. Okay, this is when I go to the Y at night with the kids. 22.5 kilometers. Look at the dash reading. When the car is warmed up and it's not that cold out, 22.2 kilowatt hours used and 100% on electric. And we would have been using heat on these trips because these are normal everyday life trips. I use the heat in the car regularly. Only when I'm testing for you guys am I a moron and shut the heat off. So that's why we're only getting 22 kilometers because the heat was on. But look, 100% of the trip. We compare that to today's trip we used, a third more electric power, and we didn't get 100% coverage. So not plugging in your car, guys, is going to cost you a lot of electric that you could be using. The car will start and run fine, and once it warms up, it will go into electric mode, but these are the numbers you're going to be looking at right here, guys. Thanks for watching.